apologize for interrupting, but just as we call the meeting to order, I wonder if I might have the privilege of introducing our new CAO. Our new CAO is present, Sean Everett. We're really pleased to have you with us here in the municipality of Meaford, and thank you for attending this meeting. Sean's just his third day, so try and be a little easy on him.
Well, we look forward to hearing lots of detailed thoughts from you, Sean, on your day 3. So if I could, let me call the Pump Storage Advisory Committee meeting to order. We're missing Howard Fletcher, but I believe everyone else is in attendance. I could just take a moment of reflection. Thank you. There anyone that needs to disclose pecuniary interests? Nope. Public participation, a critical part of this committee. Members of the public are encouraged to provide the committee with their comments and questions. Presentations must be pre-arranged with Kirsten Higginson, the project administrator for the pump storage project, before the agenda is released. Members of the public who wish to make a deputation or about a specific agenda item at the meeting must register in advance with Kirsten. And do we have any public presentations? There are none this time. Great. Are there any deputations on items on the agenda? No. Okay. So we'll move to the approval of the minutes. I believe the minutes were shared with everyone on the committee. Are there any comments or changes? No. Can I get a motion to approve? Adam, and a second. Martin, thank you. Done. Items of information. So we got 2 today. The Great Lakes St. Lawrence Cities Initiative presentation is first.
Sorry, for you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure who is doing this presentation.
If I may, Mr. Chair, it will be a gentleman named Philippe. He should be online.
Yes. Okay. Philippe?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great.
Wait, sorry.
Philippe, can I just ask you to tell me when to advance the slides?
Yes, happy to. Sorry, just running into a few technical difficulties. Okay. So everyone can hear me, and I assume the slides are on the screen.
They are.
Fantastic. Okay, there we go. Now I can see you folks. It's alternating between myself and the council room. So it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to present and share more information about the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence Cities Initiative. I'm Phil Murphy-Rayome, Chief Development Officer with the organization. I'm based in the Greater Montreal region and have been with the Cities Initiative for coming on 4 years. I started with the organization as the policy director, and over the last few years have taken on more of a strategic and operational role with the organization. And so if we can just move on to slide number 3. So the Cities Initiative is a multinational coalition of municipal and Indigenous government executives that represent communities from across the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River region with two missions that we're looking to accomplish. The first one is to promote economic prosperity for our communities. But also to protect the freshwater, which is really the foundation of our region's success for the benefit of current and future generations. Next slide, please. We were founded just over 20 years ago by the mayors of Chicago and Toronto. And since I provided the slides, we've actually seen a large growth in our membership. We're now at more than 325 members. representing over 20 million residents from across the region. Our membership spans from Duluth, Minnesota, and I can also happily report that our membership now extends further east than Rimouski, Quebec. Gaspé, Quebec just joined the organization this week. And a large part of our membership growth over the last month or so has been thanks to our work in terms of building relationships with Indigenous communities. So we've seen the addition of the Anishinaabe Nation and the Great Lakes Intertribal Council on the U.S. side, mostly located in the state of Wisconsin. Next slide, please. As an organization, we're focused on four outcomes, or what we call our strategic pillars. So when it comes to healthy lakes and rivers, we want to strengthen source water protection through community-focused freshwater investments that will expand pollutant monitoring and mitigation, combating invasive species, as well as enhancing community engagement and awareness when it comes to water pollution and water use. Um, Closely tied to this idea of healthy lakes and rivers is our safe and affordable water pillar, which is essentially looking at securing long-term, predictable, and dedicated funding for water and wastewater infrastructure, in large part to support population growth, as well as keeping water rates affordable throughout the region. But also looking at embedding resilience into our water infrastructure, and thus looking at federal and provincial funding programs that will enhance investments and build in resilience as one of the outcomes for those water systems. And that's one of the elements that we're seeing more and more frequently, is that a lot of our water systems, especially when it comes to stormwater, becomes overcharged as our weather systems become more extreme, where our rain events become more sudden and a lot stronger. So we have less frequent rain, but stronger storms. And thus those systems get overcharged. And so we see the need for federal and provincial governments to come to the table with enhanced funding to help address, modernize, and upgrade those systems for municipalities. Next slide, please. And closely tied to that theme of resilience, our third pillar is around climate and coastal resilience. So ensuring that municipalities are able to prepare for and adapt to enhancing climate change and more extreme weather. Through increased investments in disaster resilience, a restored shoreline protection program, expanding flood mapping, as well as the establishment of a public flood insurance program. And our newest pillar is what we call economic transformation, which is essentially looking at how we foster a blue and green economic corridor across our region, which will attract sustainable industries, support more clean energy, develop inclusive and resilient waterfront development, and enhance shipping and rail infrastructure to boost our region's prosperity. And with that, we'll go to slide number 8. So 2 slides, please. So when it comes to our climate and coastal resilience pillar, which is one that we've been extremely active on both sides of the border, it really came out of the extreme flooding events that we saw in the region in 2017 and 2019. There was a recognition that our region is especially at risk, but one that isn't necessarily seen to be at risk by our federal governments. When we look at the fact that 80% of the US Great Lakes shoreline is privately owned, 20% of Canada's shoreline is privately owned, along with the fact that 2 of Canada's largest cities are located in the region. There is a fragmented landscape in which innovative solutions, cost-effective solutions, but solutions that bring a range of stakeholders need to be considered and invested in. And so that is certainly a message that we take to our federal and provincial counterparts. And also our big focus when it comes to resilience is looking at the uptake of green infrastructure solutions. We recognize that they are being rolled out, but that there is still a lack of awareness in a lot of municipal administrations, as well as limits on funding when it comes to that infrastructure. But we definitely see green infrastructure and nature-based solutions being part of the solution in building up resilience for our region. Next slide, please. So a large part of our policy work with the organization is led by what we call mayor's commissions. So essentially, they're policy setting committees that work on both sides of the border. And so we do have a mayor's commission on coastal resilience, which was formed out of the 2017 and 2019 flood events. On the Canadian side, the commission is led by Mayor Sandra Easton of Lincoln, Ontario, or Lincoln, Ontario, and Mayor Gary McNamara of Tecumseh. We also have about a dozen mayors involved on both sides of the border on this commission, and we're always looking for new members to be part of those commissions as well. Next slide, please. In terms of advancing adaptation policy, we did put forward two essential and critical documents. So the first one was what's called the Action Plan to Protect the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence, which came out of a collaborative that included the Council of the Great Lakes Region, ourselves, the Fishery Commission, and a few other groups. And that action plan outlined 30 different recommendations to address different a whole range of issues impacting Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River water quality. One of them is tied to erosion and local flooding and how that can have a detrimental impact on water quality, and thus we need to see investments upstream to address shoreline resiliency. In the spring of 2022, we also outlined recommendations for improving municipal coastal resilience. So those were recommendations that came out of the Mayor's Commission at that time. And a lot of those recommendations were tied also to upcoming or federal announcements and priorities, including enhanced investments in freshwater protection, as well as the establishment of the Canada Water Agency. So essentially, we tied our recommendations to the need to include shoreline resilience as part of the programs, those funding programs, as well as the Canada Water Agency's mandate. And that's certainly something that we have seen and which I'll cover in future slides. Another area of adaptation policy that's come out is through our press work. So highlighting the need for shoreline protection in our media engagement, as well as policy resolutions that have been put forward by our membership, including the one that you can see on the slide from Contrecoeur, Quebec, looking for the reestablishment of a shoreline protection program that existed along the St. Lawrence after the creation of the Seaway to protect the shoreline from erosion, given the high level of marine traffic in that region. And we've seen other resolutions come out over the years relating to this issue of adaptation and coastal resilience. Next slide, please. So in terms of some of those key recommendations, and I'll go through these quickly since I've highlighted a few of them, but looking for a top up to the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. So that's federal funding that it basically invests in climate resilient infrastructure. It is a fund that has been consistently oversubscribed, which is an indication that it is quite popular and quite needed by municipalities. There's also the need for a publicly funded flood insurance program to protect Canadians as a stopgap measure, given that a lot of Canadians are seeing their flood insurance or their insurance premiums go up and or have their houses become uninsurable as flood mapping becomes more refined and updated with updated climate change projections. Another element that came out of our recommendations and our discussions with our membership is setting up a center of expertise to support municipalities with technical knowledge and assistance when it comes to green infrastructure. Again, to help build those knowledge gaps, be able to showcase some best practices when it comes to using nature or best nature-based solutions. And then, of course, hearkening back to that resolution by Contrecoeur of reinstating the federal funding for shoreline erosion. And that was a recommendation that was also unanimously adopted by the Federal Transport Committee last fall. I will go to the next slide, please, to highlight some of the recent wins when it comes to this area of work. So we did finally see the creation of the Canada Water Agency last year, as well as a record $420 million for Great Lakes protection, which did include coastal resilience. And that is something that we do want to highlight is the fact that that funding and a few funding calls that have come out since that funding announcement have included elements of coastal resilience and streams that address that particular element. We also saw the launch of the National Adaptation Strategy, which included flood hazard or flood mapping funding as part of those investments. And just this January at the Roma conference, we joined Conservation Ontario in announcing funding for adapting to climate hazards along the Great Lakes funding that was made possible thanks to that Natural Resources Canada funding that was announced earlier this year, last fall. And again, this is a first for our region. So historically, the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence have not been seen as a coastal region, and thus weren't eligible for coastal flooding or coastal erosion funding. And so this is a huge paradigm shift for the region. And so we were pleased to be part of to see our region be part of that program. Next slide, please. So in terms of that partnership with Conservation Ontario, they have a program that will create frameworks for engaging heads of council, senior municipal leaders and Conservation Authority board members to become local government resilience, coastal resilience champions, and empowering local elected officials to address shoreline issues, share best practices, as well as collaborating on these issues. And so that's the piece that the Cities Initiative will be contributing to as part of our partnership with Conservation Ontario that's been funded by Natural Resources Canada. And if we go to the next slide, the intent of this or the projected outcomes of this pilot project that's being led by Conservation Ontario across three regions, including Lake Ontario, Southern Lake Huron, and Lake Superior, is to foster innovation, sharing data and best practices across those regions, as well as fostering collaboration on water strategies and resilience strategies across watersheds. So rather than looking at a piecemeal or a municipal by municipal approach, taking a watershed approach is seen as one of the best practices that not only we can adopt in Ontario, but throughout the region. Now we'll just skip to slide number 16, please, to look a bit more on our economic transformation work. So this year, I'll rewind back to last year. As part of our annual conference in Montreal, we had the mayors of Montreal, Chicago, and Milwaukee sign a declaration essentially committing themselves and the city's initiative to fostering the development and advancement of an economic transformation action plan. So that action plan, which will be set over 10 years, will be presented this fall. So we're targeting Climate Week in New York to announce this plan to essentially create a thriving blue and green economic corridor. And if we go to the next slide, we'll look at the four elements that will be built into this economic transformation action plan. So part of that will include attracting green and blue industries, fostering job creation in those industries, as well as fostering water innovation, and essentially, and of course, continuing to foster and encourage economic development that respects our freshwater resources and uses them sustainably. We also have a transportation pillar that is largely focused on the marine transport sector, but of course looks at how that sector is integrated in our rail and highway network systems, but essentially looking at how we can further leverage the Seaway and the Great Lakes as a way to transport goods, resources across our region in a more sustainable manner, as well as helping to get congestion off of our roads and highways. The third element is looking at energy and how municipalities and other industry and other levels of government can work together to promote and facilitate the transition to a clean energy grid, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as well as supporting a resilient electrification of our communities and our society. And then finally, on a more micro level, looking at waterfronts and how they can be transformed into accessible multi-use areas of cities that can help drive economic development and equitable communities. So that's certainly an action plan that we're proud to be developing and looking forward to announcing later this year. And then the final element I wanted to cover as part of our presentation, and we'll jump to slide 19, is, of course, given the current context with the U.S. administration, with the Canada-U.S. relationship, is as a transboundary, as a binational, multinational organization, of course, we have an interest in putting out a position against the tariffs that have been proposed and implemented by the current administration, but also in fostering and encouraging and highlighting the importance of the Canada-U.S. relationship, particularly for our region. Um, so since the administration came into place and announced these tariffs, we've affirmed our strong opposition to those tariffs on Canadian goods entering the U.S., expressing our solidarity with impacted communities and businesses, but also encouraging states and provinces to take a stand on those policies to protect jobs and strengthen our regional economic cooperation, urging the federal governments to consider relief measures for municipalities. Of course, we know that they're considering and implementing relief measures for companies and for workers, but there will also, of course, be downstream impacts on municipalities from economic downturns stemming from those tariffs, and definitely want to be highlighting those to our other senior level government partners. As well as collaborating with other partners on strategies to mitigate economic damage and help put forward that message. Um, so just a few weeks ago, the mayor of St. Catharines, Matt Cisco, who is on our board and executive committee, and myself were at the board meeting of the Eastern Ontario Wardens Caucus to sign a memorandum of understanding with that organization. And that partnership really came out of this need and interest in working together to highlight the importance of this binational relationship, to build relations across the border, to give visibility to our members and our municipalities on the U.S. side, and be able to really speak person to person around the impacts of those tariffs and the deterioration of our relationship. And so a lot of our messaging has been tied around this idea of Great Lakes, St. Lawrence strong, that we are one region and one that is highly integrated. In fact, if we were to look at the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River economy for our region, it represents $8 trillion Canadian in economic activity every year. And so if we were our own country, we would be the third largest economy in the world. We also are shared stewards of a freshwater resource that represents 20%, excuse me, of the world's freshwater resources, but also a source of drinking water for 40 million Canadians and Americans. And so, more than other regions of both our countries, that relationship that exists, that has been fostered over decades and even centuries, is absolutely critical and important to maintain if we're going to maintain those important economic and environmental elements. Another part of our activity, and we'll go to the next slide, when it comes to carrying that message, was our recent work tied to Great Lakes Day in Washington. Um, so Great Lakes Day is an annual event that takes place in the U.S. Capitol. It's organized by an organization called the Great Lakes Commission, which essentially is our equivalent, but really bringing together states and provinces around the Great Lakes. And so we send a delegation every year to Great Lakes Day in DC. This year, as you can imagine, there was outsized interest from our Canadian members. To go down to DC to meet with congressional officials and other administration officials. And so we had a historic delegation of 31, excuse me, more than 31 mayors and elected officials, including 16 representatives from Canadian municipalities, 14 representatives from the US. We had Grand Council Chief Linda DeBosque from the Anishinaabe Nation, who was also in DC. And we also partnered with the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative around joint events, joint meetings, which led to 20 congressional meetings. We also held a trade and industry roundtable. We had 3 U.S. mayors attend a meeting at the White House, again, to bring those viewpoints to the U.S. administration. And on the Friday of that week, we also held a press conference with representatives from both countries, essentially outlining the importance of our binational relationship, as well as our opposition to tariffs. On the next slide, you can see some photos from Great Lakes Day. And I'll just take a moment also to highlight that last week, last week on April 2nd, so the day that the president was announcing an update on the tariffs, which has since changed for a lot of countries, but not ours. But we again brought mayors from Canada and the US for a virtual press conference to highlight the impact, the expected impact that those tariffs would have on communities on both sides of the border. And so we had the mayor of Toronto, the mayor of Chicago, the mayor of Milwaukee stand up and essentially say these tariffs are not right. And so that, the work will continue, but we're quite pleased to see how U.S. Members and mayors have come out in defense of that relationship. So it's not just a one-sided conversation coming from the Canadian side. We are seeing that U.S. members are concerned about this. In terms of next steps when it comes to fostering and building those relationships, is our annual conference coming up this May in Milwaukee. So if we can just go to the next slide. Our conference will be held in Milwaukee around the theme of the future of fresh water. We've actually extended the deadline for the discounted rate to April 30th. So apologies for that oversight there. But on top of talking around topics like water consumption, water protection, and water resilience against local flooding and shoreline erosion, we'll be highlighting the importance, once again, of that U.S.-Canada relationship. So we'll be putting forward a resolution and declaration around that theme. Again, we'll be holding a press event to highlight, again, that importance of the relationship, not only from a Canadian perspective, but from a U.S. perspective. And with that, we'll just go to the last slide, which has my contact information. It's been a pleasure to present to you, and I'll be happy to answer your questions as best as possible.
Great. Thank you, Philippe, for the presentation. Any questions from the committee? Yep. Ginny?
Hi, Phil. I have 2 questions. My first one is, how would an open loop pump storage project with 375 acres flushing water into Georgian Bay, how would that improve water quality and the ecology?
That's a good question. I can't speak to a specific project, including the pump storage project. But I think as an organization, I guess there's 2 elements that I want to bring up. One is looking at the range of the 3 pillars of sustainability. So sustainable economic development, sustainable social development, but also sustaining our environment. And so, when we look at whether it's projects or policies, we definitely look at it from that rubric. And the other one is, and we've come across some projects where there isn't um, I guess consensus across the board, whether it's in a region or across borders. And as a policy, as an organization, we don't take a stance on specific projects for that exact reason, unless again there's a consensus from the membership. But I'll use other examples like Line 5 is one where the organization hasn't taken a stance. Given that there's not necessarily a consensus viewpoint from our members, and one where one side's view would be seen as going against other members' viewpoints on that.
Right. My second question is regarding the insurance you had mentioned. Would it cover homes below a 375 acre reservoir owned by a publicly traded company? Would you cover the residents?
I'd have to look at the specifics of the policy proposals that are being put forward. So the public flood insurance program is a policy that has been at least notionally advanced by the federal government that is working with insurance industries. I'd I'd be happy to look into what the specifics are when it comes to who would be covered or not, and send that back to staff for your information.
Yeah, that'd be great because it's my understanding that most of the residents below this reservoir wouldn't be covered, and TCE is not willing to cover the residents below it. So it'd be good to know that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I've made a note. Thank you.
There are other questions from the committee? Shirley?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Philippe, for being with us today. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit to this Pump Storage Advisory Committee about your role and how you might be able to assist or act as a resource for us in terms of our efforts here to move forward and better understand the pump storage project and all of the impacts, positive and negative, that it may bring to our community.
Sure. Well, what is nice about the city's initiative is the fact that we bring a whole range of members from across the Great Lakes and St. Lawrence River region. And so, we can look at examples from the US. And I know, based on my understanding, there are very few examples of pump storage facilities in North America. If I'm not mistaken, there's only one in Michigan. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. But we have access to a range of municipal elected officials, staff from across the region. We also have relationships with a range of universities, research facilities across the region, other stakeholder groups, environmental groups, economic groups. And so whenever a member comes to us with a question that we can't answer, we're always happy to tap into our network and see what we can find for that member. And that's certainly an element of our service. We do have over 300 members, but I still like to see ourselves as a bespoke municipal association, or almost a boutique municipal association, where we can have more of that hands-on and individual support for municipalities. But essentially that range of expertise that we can tap into, either from within the organization or from without, as part of our broader network, is certainly an advantage of the organization.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to thank you, Philippe, for that. That's really, really helpful. So as the best way to go about that would be then to utilize your contact and to reach out to you with questions from this municipality, and then you would see what you could do, I guess, in terms of providing any resources or answers to our questions or concerns.
That's correct. Yes. Please do feel free to contact me. I'll use my example as a tour guide when I was a student. That doesn't feel that long ago, but when I look at my age, time has certainly passed. Whenever we were on a tour, we obviously had a lot of knowledge at our fingertips, but didn't have every single factoid available to us. And so always made sure to offer, to be able to support, be able to provide that answer, and get back to people as best as we could. Um, Depending on the complexity of the question or issue brought to us, may make it a bit longer for us to be able to get an answer. But certainly we'll do our best to get back to folks whenever they come to us with a question in a timely manner and with the best possible answer that we can get.
Any other questions? Yep, Adam?
Yes, hello, and thank you very much for the presentation. I guess my only ask is, what does this cost?
Sure. Well, our membership is population based for municipalities, and I don't recall what Meaford's contribution is, but I can look that up really quickly if you can just bear with me for a second. I don't know if you had a follow-up question in the meantime.
I guess then never mind. That was going to be my question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking it up right now.
No, we're just clarifying in the room that yes, Meaford is a member of this initiative. Is the municipality that has the other pump storage facility in Michigan a member?
I don't believe they are. I'd have to double check, but I don't believe they are.
Because there would be a lot of information we'd want from them. Okay, thank you.
That said, we're happy to reach out. Always happy to be put on on other municipalities' radars. So happy to reach out, and if and when we make a connection, would be happy to connect you folks with them.
Okay. Any other questions of Philippe? Yep, Lindy.
Thank you so much. I just have a quick question. I know you talked a little bit about how this initiative is meant to be environmentally beneficial as well as economically beneficial, and it's my understanding that that is a difficult thing to balance. Oftentimes they don't go hand in hand. So how do you make sure that you're benefiting both sides, like both, I guess, objectives of this initiative?
Sure. Well, as with any member-based association or any nonprofit organization, really, we do take a lot of guidance from our board of directors. And again, with a board of directors, you have a diverse set of viewpoints. Some that come in with with a stronger environmental bent. Others that come with more of an economic bent. But generally, what we found is there's a lot of, I guess, sort of a compromise position that comes out of that work, and we see that um, with the U.S. Canada relationship issue, where on the surface of it, and I'll have to admit that at first I was concerned that U.S. members wouldn't even come out and talk about the U.S. Canada relationship. But what we've seen is by highlighting some of the facts before our members, and for them talking to their local stakeholders, they get a perspective. I mean, the other element I want to highlight is the fact that our board of directors, all of our members, are elected officials. And thus also need to balance the public interest with decisions that are being made. But essentially, I would say that that's how we balance it out is really looking at the perspectives of our board, and of course, based on the advice that we provide as an organization and as staff to the board.
Great, thank you so much.
And actually, sorry, on that point, and I'm happy to share the link to our website. But if you look at the resolutions that have been put forward by our membership, you'll see again diversity of perspectives, and many of which have a strong environmental stance, or bring forward issues and concerns when it comes to water quality.
Great. If there are no further questions, we'll let Philippe get on with his evening. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
It's great. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your questions. It's always very engaging, and I have a bit of homework to get back to you folks. So stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on to CAO 2025-02, the proposed community benefit agreement bylaw. The committee was given a pamphlet, or a bunch of paper to go. I trust everyone read through it. There's a lot of information on it. And this is just I have a clarifying question. As the committee has questions, and there are members of council on the committee, and we happen to have the CAO, who do we direct these questions to?
If I may suggest, Mr. Chair, we also have our manager of planning here, Denise McCarl, and I think Denise is quite knowledgeable on the bylaw. So if I may put you on the spot, Denise, I'd suggest the questions be addressed to Denise.
Welcome to the party.
Mr. Chair, if it's appropriate, if you think it's a great idea, I have a presentation prepared, so it's not visual, but I can go through some of the highlights of the bylaw and why we're coming here today.
Yeah.
And maybe hit some of those key points, and I'm here to answer questions, et cetera, and I can explain some of that in here.
And I would ask you not to just hit the treetops, because we need to understand this a lot. So help us in any way you can.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as already explained, my name is Denise McCarl, and I'm Manager of Planning Services. I did author the report that you were provided. I got some help with the covering memo just to give you a little bit more background and to provide you with that email that you can use to provide feedback after the fact. So, it's a pleasure to be here today, and I do want to go over some of the highlights, but I'm available to dig down. So on March 10th, 2025, Council directed staff to prepare a community benefits agreement bylaw. That proposed bylaw was provided to council in that form on March 28th, 2 weeks later. So we worked really hard over those 2 weeks to get that in front of council as quickly as we could, so that we could give lots of time for community feedback, being that we thought was a very important component. While the motion of council references TCE's project, this bylaw would apply to other types of projects that maybe we haven't contemplated yet, but could be outside of the framework of the Planning Act, which is a little bit unusual, but has happened before. So it has a broader application than just, in this case, the TC Energy's pumped storage project. The examples I used at the council meeting were a little bit hypothetical. If you'll remember, there was such a thing as the Green Energy Act a few years ago that was repealed by the province. But when it was in play, councils didn't have the right to regulate green energy projects at that time. This type of bylaw might have allowed for that. I'm not going to suggest going back in time that it did, but that's the type of thing that we thought this bylaw might apply to, or other types of legislation that the federal government or the province might have certain jurisdictional matters. The other example was telecommunications towers, which are outside of the municipal jurisdiction. We have a say in it. We have some kind of we're a commenting agency, but we don't cite them or approve them necessarily. So there's other hypothetical projects. I don't want to, speculate too much, but we realize there could be gaps where projects might not be subject to the Planning Act. So in my presentation, I'm going to go over the basics of the bylaw. We can dig down into any specifics. And if you read my report, it talks a little bit about why we're here today for this committee. It's part of the communications or in the consultations plan is to speak directly to PSAC. And it's really important for me to make sure that everyone on the committee understands that this isn't your only chance to provide comments. I understand that this is a hefty topic. And so to expect you to have all the answers of what you want to say today is not reasonable. And so you have a couple more weeks to kind of think about it. So today you can engage in discussion, provide feedback. I will take that down. And then you can go away and think about some things and new questions may arise and you're free to email that is on the memo, the covering memo with your questions, your comments about it. And what we plan to do is take all of the information we receive and put it into a commenting matrix and try to have some answers to these questions and concerns and feedback. Could just be, we suggest this or that too. It may not be a concern. And then we will bring that to council for their consideration. It is also our plan that as the questions and things come up, we are going to be populating. We've already got some of those on our website now where this document lives on our website. We've got an FAQ. And so we will continue to build on that FAQ until decisions are made to make sure that people have a place to go and see the additional information as it comes out. And I don't propose to know all the answers today. And I know that's probably not what you want to hear. You want to hear that someone's here to answer all of the questions. There may be lots of questions you have that I don't quite have answers to. I will record those and make sure that those are part of the FAQ. So you can look at those before decisions are made and you can have additional feedback. It's not a one-time feedback. You have a chance to provide additional feedback. Council will be considering this bylaw again on April 28th. And we've asked that to try to get as much feedback as possible for April 21st to give us the ability to get all that into that report. So I think that date was chosen for that reason. It gives us just over a month of time with this being kind of a public document. Let's see. So where do I want to start? The highlights. So I'll start with the highlights and we can dig down. So this bylaw is intended to mimic the framework that previously or already exists in the Planning Act. And why would we do that? Well, the act, when something is proposed, that development is proposed, big or small, has timelines that things have to happen. It has a public consultation process. It has the ability for us to create policies to say what types of reports we require, what types of, who's approving things and the notification protocol for the public. How did the public get engaged? In this type of situation, we don't have that. So while we have been calling this the Community Benefits Agreement bylaw, it includes much more than that. So it includes multiple things like a notification process, a set of reports that we need in order to assess impacts of a project. It includes potential for benefits. It has that laid out. And then because it's a bylaw itself, it has that framework for enforcing the bylaw. In table 1 of the report, it has a consultation plan. You don't have to look at it now, but just so you can see what we were using to lay out all the ways we're going to try to hit the public through social media, through the newspaper, through the website, through this committee, through council. And I've been given an update today. We were given a little bit of an update that so far it's working great. We're getting quite a lot of interest on the page that we have, and there's been a lot of clicks to our website through social media and the channels. So we're really inspired by that the campaign is working well. We've just started to get some feedback and we're just starting to put some of that together.
Sorry, to help level set for us, because we're supposed to be trying to get public participation, as you can tell from the filled
crowds.
rooms, we're not being, what is so far getting good click-throughs. That sounds good. Is that hundreds? Tens? How many?
We were
people?
told over 1,000 in a
Okay.
week, in just 10 days.
Fantastic. Okay.
Yeah. So just because we don't see droves, I don't think it means that people aren't interested. I mean, there may be people that are still working on review. There's a lot of meat here. So I expect that we'll continue to get more comments. We've just started to get comments. So I'm just going to go through a few of the highlights. So on page 3 of my report, I say it. So the bylaw will provide the municipality with the authority. I think that's important. The authority to assess impacts and benefits and consult with the public before council makes a decision on whether to approve a community benefits agreement. So I think that framework is really important. And just to understand that it would apply to private developments that are not wholly subject to the Planning Act. So if the Planning Act applies completely to something, this does not apply. So I did have a question in the last week where someone said, isn't this doubling everything? It's not. This is only when someone doesn't have to do a zoning amendment or a site plan, or they're not doing some other kind of Planning Act related process already.
So I'm gonna, and I hope that everyone sees I'm asking dumb questions, so feel free to join in. But how, for layperson citizen, something that is not in the Planning Act, describe what that might be. So if I want to build a house, that's covered in the Planning Act, I assume.
So if you want to build a house, likely you already have zoning on your property, or you're already in the, the Niagara Escarpment Plan or something like that, that regulates what can happen on your property. Most people know what they're allowed to do, and some of that is in the Planning Act, or it might be in another act. If you want to change your residential property to a commercial one, that would be something subject to the Planning Act. If you wanted to create a new subdivision, that would be something to, so we're talking about things like our official plan policy and our zoning bylaw. Site plan control applies to multi-residential dwellings over 10 units, and it applies to commercial and industrial development. Lots of things can happen without coming to us. We set a framework of regulation, and if you meet those regulations, such as zoning, you don't need to come deal with us in the Planning Act. You just go ahead and get a building permit. But this would be other types of things that aren't contemplated already, or are commercial or industrial in nature. So if we consider this an industrial endeavor, normally industrial endeavors would be subject to the Planning Act. So if you're building a facility in the industrial park, you would have to go through a process, at least of site plan control, where we would look at the development that you're doing, and we might have to have something to say about servicing and how the roads are dealt with. If you have, traffic impact studies, noise studies, things like that. Is that kind of what you were thinking,
Yeah,
Mr. Chair?
I'm just trying. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Bob?
To follow up on that, are the lands of the base governed by that Planning Act, or is this only provincial land outside the base?
So that's a great question. Currently, we consider the majority of what the project is trying to do is outside of the Planning Act, which is why we've developed this bylaw. So the bylaw is to apply because the Planning Act isn't entirely triggered. We may not know exactly what might apply, but we know that it isn't entirely subject to the Planning Act. If you want, I can just go through the rest of this, and then if people have more questions, I'm happy to, because I think they might be answered potentially. So looking at, I'm just going to do an overview of the bylaw itself. So the first part of the bylaw is the recitals, and that's the part that establishes the framework of the legislation, what we're going under. So what authority are we applying this bylaw under? And each bylaw has a different set of regulations that they're working under. There could be different acts or legislation, such as the Planning Act, for example. So that's the first part. And just to preface this, we put this bylaw together, and we did run it through our municipal solicitor to make sure that it had the framework was sound. And they've given us some feedback on it, and we've made some changes to it already. So after that, we've got our definitions section. And it's really key to include a definition section to make sure that what the terms are, we have a definition for, so we're not trying to figure it out later. If we don't have definitions, it's very easy to challenge a bylaw. So some of those you might notice are very helpful, like explaining what is a proposal, what authority we're talking about, what is a public authority, territory is defined. Then we lay out the purpose of the bylaw, which explains when it applies. So in this case, or why it applies. So in this case, it talks about why, we're looking to support and promote sustainable development and to establish a framework to create this regulation. That's all important for understanding why we put this together. It also goes through and talks about the application. When does it apply and when it doesn't apply? So we've talked about that already. It doesn't apply to things entirely subject to the Planning Act. And it's meant to apply to things that are larger in nature generally. So somebody just, somehow there's something not in the Planning Act. I can't imagine what that would be, but it's a super minor project that isn't going to affect anyone at all, probably doesn't need to go through this process. It also talks about when it doesn't apply for sure. So, or when, what you can't do. So you have to, right in the general provisions, you must go through this process if you're one of the types of development that we're talking about. So it has a prohibition. So unless you have executed a community benefits agreement, subject to this bylaw, and we've determined that it is, we've determined it's part of the one or more regulatory processes, you can't do the development. That's the way that this bylaw is set up. It talks a lot about some of the other things. I think some things maybe are less important than others. Really important, initial notice. We have a notification requirement. We've got a process requirement upon receipt of notice of a project of what we expect of a proponent. And that's the 4 reports, initial reports, development description report, the existing setting report, applicable bylaws and policies report, and the potential impacts report. It's very specific about what those are, and we can talk about any of these if you're just trying to understand what those mean further to this. This would be the beginning stages of the reports would tell us what this project is to help us start to understand the next steps of the review. Following that, no less than 60 days or no more than 60 days later, we expect to see those other 2 reports, mitigation measures and community benefits report, and a consultation report. So we want the proponent to start to develop some of those things on their own. And we need some of these reports are the things that we believe we need in order to assess the impacts of a project. And it gives us a framework. These are very similar to what the Planning Act would require. It would require consultation. It would require us to have policies to identify impacts of a project. And without this, we're left a little bit scrambling on knowing. So we'd have to invent the wheel each time. So I think having this set out helps us to define this ahead of time, and it offers some predictability for a proponent. So they know what the expectation is. It talks about how we're going to review them and all of that, and consultation, and also provides the ability for us to have peer reviews done at the cost of the proponent, so that the municipality and taxpayers are not subject to the costs of reviewing these documents. And that's common with the Planning Act as well. So if someone was coming in with an industrial development under the Planning Act for in the industrial park, we would ensure peer reviews were paid for by the proponent, not taxpayers. It talks about other things that we require as part of the review. And then kind of the part that everyone's thinking about with this bylaw is the community benefits portion, where once we've assessed the project, we can start to work on what kinds of benefits should be part of the agreement. And those will be unique to every project. So I can't answer exactly what a project will have to do other than what's laid out in here to date. And that includes 5 things. So the first one was ensuring that we have costs to cover the process we've already laid out in section 1, which was the review of it. The second one is paying the fee that we've asked for to review. The third is that we require following notice, we require them to pay any other costs set out in section 7. The fourth is the one that we're all talking about, but I don't know that it's necessarily the only important part of this. And that is this community benefits agreement minimum payment, which is mimicking the process under the Planning Act for parkland dedication. So if a developer was putting an industrial park building up, so we've got our industrial park and they're putting in a building, they would be required to pay 2% of the value of the property to the municipality based on an appraisal. And I know that one's been one of the things that council has asked a couple of questions about, and we've had a couple of public questions about how do we know that valuation? It is done by a certified appraiser, and it's based on the area of land that they're using. And that's the minimum requirement. They're required to enter into that agreement, and they have to pay those benefits at the same time as executing the agreement with us. The next section allows us to enforce this bylaw if we need to. And it mentions the Provincial Offences Act, which is the way that we have set out to enforce it in this particular case. And also allows us to delegate some things to staff if we need to, if council determines that's appropriate. And it also talks about reviewing this bylaw every 5 years to ensure that it's up to date. So that's the kind of basics. I mean, it's a little more than high level, but we can go into any of these sections. I may not have all the answers tonight, but I want to make sure that if I do have them, we can get them on the table tonight. And otherwise, we're going to have to write them down. I think some of the questions I've had to date are not answerable because they're so detailed, or they are outside the scope of this. So just to clarify, this report and proposed bylaw does not assess the impacts of this pump storage proposal. So at this stage, I don't know the impacts. What we're saying is give us some reports, go through a process with us, and then we'll assess the impacts. So I know I've had people ask questions about building permits and valuation and things like that. Some of these maybe are outside the scope. And I know that that can be frustrating because you kind of want to get to the end. But right now, what we're looking at is a framework for how to get to that question. And we think this is the one of the best tools that we've come up with to do that, because it's so familiar to developers generally who are working on other types of projects. It's very similar to the Planning Act process. If that makes sense. And I want to make sure, just remind you that it's great. We really wanted to spur discussion, and I don't want anyone to feel that their questions are stupid. They're not stupid. We've had lots of questions already that are just basic, or maybe people haven't dug down. Please go ahead and ask anything. And if we will write them down if we don't have answers, and we'll make sure they are part of that matrix. So at some point in the next little while, you'll start seeing the answers to some of these questions if they're answerable. That makes sense.
Great. Adam, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a couple questions here. First one, and Bob, you and I were thinking along the same lines. On page 4, it specifically states that the proposed development has to be within municipal boundaries for it to fall under this. I was under the impression that because this development is on the military's property, it's not. So would this bylaw then not cover this project?
Denise?
It's a great question. It's already been asked by members of council because it's such a great question. So this bylaw applies to what we would call the territory of Meaford, so the municipal boundary. It doesn't matter whether it's private property or public lands, if it's federal land. So if someone owns a property, like we can think of a few other properties around that are either federal or it could be provincial lands. It doesn't mean that that doesn't apply to them. That's just a property owner as far as this bylaw is concerned. So the jurisdiction of the municipality still includes the federal lands because their address is still municipal. It's not this isn't like the UN property where it's like in, international territory or something like that in New York City. This isn't like that. So while we may not have the jurisdiction of the Planning Act in this particular case, it doesn't mean that the federal lands aren't in the municipality of Meaford.
Okay, and I guess to expand on that, if they were in violation of this, you kind of said that you could stop the development of a project. Are you saying that this bylaw will allow us, the municipality of Meaford, to stop the pump storage project if it wanted?
So I think that's a great question, Mr. Chair. To answer it, I think where it's what we're saying in the bylaw is we're willing to enforce the bylaw that a community benefits agreement is required, not necessarily use this bylaw to enforce the project separately. So it's not like we would be charging them under zoning or something like that. The purpose of this bylaw is to require a community benefits agreement to be entered into prior to a project moving forward.
You have more questions?
Yes. So, sorry, this is a big thing, and I do have a couple. And this is kind of a two-part one. And I guess whether this is the pump storage is the only one that's going to fall under, if something is partway through development during the process of this bylaw being implemented, is there a previous community benefits agreement? Because one was alluded to last year and very quickly we were told not to look at it. So is there a community benefit in place between Meaford and TCE? And would this apply to a project that is partway through its process?
So, Mr. Chair, generally speaking, bylaws cannot be acted midway through a project. In this particular case, a project isn't underway. So whether somebody is halfway building a house, we don't retroactively go in and apply a bylaw.
I'm just going to be honest. The only perspective I'm taking on this is about the pump storage project. There's going to be other stuff, and that's for council, not for me. So the project is, this bylaw would apply to the pump storage project? Is that the intent?
Yep, that's the intent. So working with our municipal solicitor, that was the intent of this bylaw. It would apply to this and other types of projects that were similar.
Got it. Okay.
But has there ever been, or is there currently a community benefits agreement with TCE or anything like that?
So, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any community benefits agreement, and I may not be the best person to answer that question. I have no knowledge of a previous community benefits agreement.
So there was discussion, I think, and I'll try to remember and someone will correct me, but there was a discussion and it was, where did the 1.5 million a year number come from? And it was from an earlier conversation, but there wasn't an agreement between the municipality and TCE. It was a discussion. Is that directionally correct?
If I may, Mr. Chair, in terms of a community benefit agreement, what we have goes back to 2022, which is an understanding that TC Energy will cover our expenses. I'm sorry, I don't have it with me or in front of me to remember everything that was included in that, but that's what comes to mind. First of all, it was signed in 2022 and it speaks predominantly to TC covering our expenses. And there are some other factoids within that particular document, which isn't the community benefit agreement that we are working towards, but it is an initial understanding, if that's helpful.
Yes, I guess it's, so to make sure that I understand this bylaw gets enacted. It is the stance that the project has not started yet, therefore this bylaw will apply.
So I'm not aware that the project has started yet.
Yeah, I guess it's the pre-development money is being spent. I don't know when when is an embryo a person? All I know is there's been work being done, right? And so I don't know when start is.
So, Mr. Chair, if it's helpful, I think we can take that as one of the questions that seems to be a little bit more complicated, and we will make sure that that's answered in our FRQ. I think it's a valid question and it should be answered.
Yeah, okay.
One more, I promise.
That's right.
The community feedback portion of this, I think digital is great. I live in that world. Is there any plans for in-person consultation, whether that be open house days or going to municipal events or things like that?
So if I can ask a clarifying question, Mr. Chair, is that in regards to this bylaw preparation, or is that in regards to a community benefits agreement in the future?
I believe it was in relation to community benefits in the future.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment, and I think probably it would make sense that if we're trying to mimic the Planning Act, that we have public meetings and other types of in-person events like we would have with those. So often a larger project will have an open house, and almost all projects have a public meeting. So we could certainly consider something like that to be codified within here.
And I think one of the challenges is those things have typically and are typically proponent driven and therefore proponent reported on. And what I think this committee is looking for is how do we do it at least arm's length of the proponent who has a natural bias.
Yeah, so Mr. Chair, just for normally under the Planning Act, well, often proponents will host a community information meeting. They may host something they call a public meeting or their own open house. There are Planning Act open houses and public meetings that are held by the municipality. So the municipality is the host. So I think that's probably likely that if we were going to include that in here, that it would be a municipally hosted one that would be then a neutral type of event.
Shirley?
If I may take a moment, Mr. Chair, I have the motion in front of me now from 2022. This was a motion brought forward to council at that point in time by Councillor Paul Vickers. And it says, whereas TransCanada Energy is proposing to construct a pump storage facility on the 4th Canadian Division Training Center, whereas TCE and the federal government are in the process of undertaking various studies as part of their federal and provincial approval process. Whereas the municipality has identified a number of concerns they wish to see addressed as part of the approval process, as outlined in a staff report approved by council on June the 1st, 2020, and I'll see if I can find that. Whereas council remains committed to have all reports peer-reviewed by qualified consultants as part of the impact assessment process. Whereas notwithstanding the approval process, council wants to ensure that the municipality receives the greatest economic benefit possible should the project receive approval from the appropriate bodies. Therefore, be it resolved that council of the municipality of Meaford hereby directs staff to bring back a report that outlines possible community benefits that can be achieved should the project proceed, including negotiations of a possible community benefits agreement for consideration by council. Okay, so that's that piece.
Shirley's working to answer Adam's question. It's good.
Sorry, Shirley.
Possible? To June 1st, 2020 to the council meeting.
Well, Shirley, and while they're doing that, I have a question. So I work with contracts, and so I'm having a hard time following some of the labeling of which sections we're in, but I'm in the purpose section. And so the second point is to trigger a carry of the process established by the bylaw as early as possible in the process, before any authority makes an irrevocable decision on private development. Who are the other authorities making an irrevocable decision?
So Mr. Chair, can you repeat what section you're talking about? Because I'm in that section and I'm not seeing that part. So maybe I'm in the wrong part.
Yeah, in purpose, so I guess it's number two. And it's what I'm just worried.
Oh, you mean number, is it 6-1? It's not this?
Section. Section 2.
That's this here, isn't it? That's what this is.
I've got a paper copy if you'd like to see. But I can tell you, I think the numbering isn't right in some of the references.
I'm looking,
Where's page 3?
why are we looking at a different bylaw? Yeah.
You went from 2 to 4.
Oh, okay.
You're missing page 3.
All right, there you go. So.
Back to
Here, yeah, okay. We got it now.
Yeah, all right. So
There's a lot of pages.
yeah, what I was looking for is just what are the other authorities that could make an irrevocable decision that we.
That's a great question. I'm not sure what all the other authorities could be, and we might create maybe a type of a list or some more information on that.
Are we worried about the provincial government saying thou bylaws shall not apply?
No, I'm not worried about it.
Okay. Okay, but we're gonna have a list of who those authorities may be.
Yeah, we could give examples.
Okay. Did you get more? No.
Share this,
Your speaker or your-
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was also going to read just to refresh our minds. This is the motion from February the 27th, 2023. The recommendation, whereas in 2019, TC Energy made public its plan to construct and operate a major 1,000 megawatt hydroelectric generating facility centered on zero emission electricity generation technology known as pump storage, related works and undertakings on lands within the municipality of Meaford. Whereas in 2020, the Council of the Municipality received and reviewed report CAO 2020-03, which Sue's looking for, and unanimously declared support for the proposed facility proceeding to the applicable approval processes, led by environmental assessments and impact assessments, including impact assessments under the Federal Impact Assessment Act. Whereas in 2021, the Department of National Defense determined that the proposed facility could be located on a portion of land within the 4th Canadian Division Training Centre in Meaford, subject to conditions. Whereas in 2022, the Council of the Municipality discussed the offer by TC Energy to provide community benefits to the municipality in relation to the proposed facility, including Council review of report CAO 2022-33 that included a draft framework for a community benefits agreement. So that's another one to look for, Sue. Whereas in 2022, the Council of the Municipality completed a 10-year review of its official plan and related community engagement, resulting in adoption of Amendment 34 to its official plan to guide physical change and development across the municipality for the next 25 years, continuing the municipality's environment first planning policy and prioritizing infrastructure that addresses sustainability and climate adaptation. Whereas in 2023, TC Energy advised the municipality that it will reimburse the municipality for the costs of technical peer reviewers of all potential impacts of the proposed facility, legal counsel on all relevant matters, and costs related to the development of a community benefits agreement between the municipality and TC Energy, including a council-approved negotiator. Therefore, be it resolved that the Council of the Municipality of Meaford hereby provides conditional support for the construction and operation of a 1,000 megawatt pump storage facility to the Provincial Minister of Energy, subject to the following conditions. Written confirmation from TC Energy of complete cost recovery for all costs reasonably incurred by the municipality in relation to the proposed facility. Development of a regulatory plan and related information gathering and disclosure requirements to address the central role and future actions of the municipality regarding the proposed facility. Formal agreement between the municipality and TC Energy on community benefits covering short, medium, and long-term benefits, and approval of the proposed facility by all relevant jurisdictions under all applicable environmental and planning processes, including any applicable environmental and/or impact assessments, etc. So I think if we can find those two reports, that may give us some of the answers Adam's looking for.
Adam?
I guess at the end of all of this, my question is there a piece of paper where we have asked all of these things and TCE has signed and said, yes, we will give them to you?
What the agreement is currently is that TC Energy will cover reasonable costs.
So yes, there is a document somewhere that outlines our ask and TCE has agreed to that we can hold them accountable to?
Signed by the then CAO Rob Armstrong in 2022. And it does, again, I don't have that in front of me, but it did state that TC Energy would provide payment for reasonable costs.
But the TCE, like
Yes.
Rob Armstrong signed it, but
Yes, the
okay,
letter was,
that I'm just
Yeah.
want clarity on that
yes, there
we
was an
can sign it all
agreement.
we want.
It was an agreement between the municipality and TCE.
Okay.
Charlie?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Personally, I've never been of the opinion that reasonable costs equate to community benefits. We would never have had these reasonable costs had it not been for the TC proposal. So the 1.5 million, that's been out there for 4 years anyway. And I'm not sure, and maybe the deputy mayor can help me. I don't think I have ever seen anything in writing with that $1.5 million figure on it. Personally, I think 10 million would be a little more acceptable, but that's a discussion for another.
We're just going to keep working through the bylaw. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One suggestion I would make would be, just because there will be a lot to digest through these reports, but I'm thinking if we put together the chronological as well as all of the appropriate reports that we can refer to that relate to this, I think that would be most effective, because I think searching for them right now and then discussing them, we're not really capturing the nuances of probably as well as we should. So if it would indulge the committee, I'll ask staff to put that chronological together. Selfishly for me in my third day, it would be very helpful as well. So that's just a suggestion I make, and I look to the committee to see if that's something they would like. Thank you.
That sounds like a great idea. So thank you. If we could do that, or if you could direct staff to do that, that would be wonderful. Okay, I'm just going to keep going and then I'll pass it on to someone else. No. In section 3, subsection 2, part 3, it discusses that there may be development listed by the municipality as exempt or minor in scale. Do we have that list? A class of or private developments. Do we have that list?
So, Mr. Chair, we do not. This one is just giving an example of when it is exempt and when it applies. And so it's just saying is within, it doesn't have the list because we don't have the bylaw yet. So this would give us the ability to exempt some if they were very small in scale.
Okay. I think. In the timing, section 5.1, as early as possible. In, I know that it's, that is meant as an intent. The intent is to do it as early as possible. I'm not sure if we use the pump storage project as a, when do we get information as early as possible? Because one of the roadblocks we've come up against is, well, we can't do that yet. It's not done, and it feels like we've passed as early as possible, but we haven't. So what is the thinking of the intent in the bylaw for when as early as possible in the process is?
So that's a great question. I think when you're thinking about other types of projects, if someone's just planning something in their mind, or they're working with their consultants, they may not be announcing that with us. We may be in some of that boat now because the project is it's in a hypothetical state. And so the early as possible would be when they are aware that they're planning to do something. So, I mean, for sure, we're putting this through as though we're talking only about pump storage, but we have to remember, if we thought there was pump storage 2.0 coming, or a different project that's just like this, we would want to have this as early as possible ahead of time. So we have a little more information about this particular project, but generally speaking, people can go quite a long ways into something before we find out about it. And I think that's where this framework is coming. If someone says we've been working on this for 15 years and now we're just dumping it here, that's not really dumping the idea of it on our laps. I think we're asking for earlier consultation. It's not specific, but we recognize it's more of a statement of intent.
Is that typical in municipal bylaws to leave it as early as possible, like vague in the language, sort of on purpose, like? I guess I can understand.
Right. Well, when a project hasn't materialized yet, we don't expect folks to have consulted. Often in our process that we do have a pre-application process where they can, at a more hypothetical or slightly less developed state, speak with us and engage with us, and we will provide feedback. And I think this is what this is trying to be similar to.
And what I'm thinking of is a project that's been funded with $285 million of pre-development monies. And we're having a hard time getting some of the answers that we've been looking for. But would this apply then? Like when it's funded, is that where's the threshold for as early as possible? I'm struggling, and you're on the spot, and I don't mean to put you there, but that is a challenge that we've had. So it's a challenge in the bylaw, and so I think it's something for council to consider as well. When is as early as possible? Because the funding's there now for pre-development. Would hopefully be there. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. If I may, in the world of development proposals, as early as possible there's so many factors. Give you an example, the Bay Bounds development out on the highway, that's been on the go for 13 years. They wanted to build houses as early as possible. So, yeah, in a proposal this huge, I don't like that term, but I think it's realistic.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last one before I move on, sorry, you've got a comment.
Maybe just, I'm the farthest thing from a planner. So just from a late sort of a review of how this is different is if this was a regular development, you have to remember that a development until they receive either pre-consultation, and even the pre-consultation is hypothetical. It's really not until the development application is submitted that the municipality really gets their hand on it, and then they review it to deem it complete. Out of that deeming complete, you could still ask for archaeological, transportation, geological, whatever. That's why this one is a little bit different, because you're outside of the Planning Act. So that, as soon as possible, I've been in lots of meetings in the pre-consult and say, well, can we get this or can we get this? And I'm, as the non-planner in the room, they ultimately always remind me that, well, we haven't even submitted our application yet. So it's something to consider. That I agree with Mr. Greenfield that, you know, soon as possible is not a wonderful term, but it's probably relevant as you get, because before applications, you really can't set timelines.
In section 7.1, there's a reference to subsection 3.1. Is that? What section is that directing us to? Because I went back and it looks like a reference into the application, which I don't think there's the notice under.
So, Mr. Chair, I believe that should read 5.1.
Okay, thank you.
I believe so. Potentially 6.1, which is where it says initial notice. So to your question, you were saying when should notice be? Just so you know, the notice is just saying we're thinking we're doing a project and here's the picture of it. There's the map, like it's not the full project. So it's just giving us a heads up in the initial notice, not the full studies. But I believe it's talking about 6.1. So that's a great, I actually think someone already pointed that out. And I've seen it in the email chain that we've set up. So good catch.
In section 8.1, it calls out section 4, and I think that number might be incorrect as well. Because following completion of the process set out in section 4, which is the prohibition section. So that probably isn't right. Are there other questions? Ginny?
Mine's just more comments. So am I allowed to give my notes?
Yes.
Like just, okay. So I have a couple small comments. So on section, under the municipal process, section 7, I guess 2. It was talking about lands within 1 kilometer. My suggestion is 3 to 5. On the section, it talks about, is it 8.4 here? We're talking about the value of the 2% value of the land, and I think it should be like a 1% value of the project. The land would be so minor. I think you want to look at values of project, not of land. The land is just peanuts at this point. And the other suggestion I had about the application, it's talking about having costs of less than, or sorry, not being under 1 million. Well, 1 million this day and age is a house. So I think you should elevate that to 5 million. You don't want every teeny little project hitting this. You want it to be at least over 5 million. You don't want a house is 1 million. So that's my 2 cents.
Mr. Chair, I'm free to just take comments, and I just want to speak to that because it was already raised before. I think it's a really great one. Just so you know, a house wouldn't be subject to this. But we do understand the scale that's being suggested. I would say that anything over, $1 million isn't a very big project anymore, but we just wanted to give a threshold. Doesn't mean it has to be subject to this, but it gives a threshold of just that it could be, and it would need to have a potential impact. So if it doesn't have any impact, then it probably isn't going to be subject to this bylaw.
Is that okay, Adam?
One more, I promise. In following the bouncing ball along here, this bylaw is stating that this project hasn't started yet and therefore will be applicable to this bylaw. Will this bylaw collect retroactive fees? Because like right now we want consultants, we want studies done, we want things done that we want the proponent to cover, but we're being told that because the project hasn't started yet, this bylaw wouldn't affect them. So how do you recoup costs through this bylaw when the project hasn't started, but we want to recoup costs?
It's a good question. I think the struggle will be, Mr. Chair, to do a bunch of studies if the project hasn't been actually launched. So I think we just want to be careful not to be trying to do studies and spend money until we have a little bit more knowing that it's going forward. on a project. But I understand the request. But I think what we're saying is when a project is super hypothetical, then this bylaw wouldn't be in effect yet.
Yeah.
When it's becoming a real project, then this bylaw would apply because a proponent would then provide notice that a project's happening, and then there we would go through the reports required, the assessment of the impacts, and what the potential benefits would need to be. So I think that's when the review starts. I know on this particular project, there has been a number of things that have started in terms of, well, comparison to other projects and things like that. And so I'm not suggesting that there's been no review or nobody's looked into anything else and we haven't spent any money yet. But I just, on typical, if we think of this could happen again, another project could be proposed, we wouldn't want to start spending money until a project was a real project, right? So, and I don't expect every single project like this that would be subject to this bylaw would necessarily be at the scale that this one is. So it may be different, but I do think it's a good question. And I think sometimes there is some pre-work that has to happen. So it's something that I will take a note of that and see if we can get to a little bit more of an answer in the FAQ.
Okay. Have at it.
Again, it just goes to like, there was going to be a consultant that we were going to have access to that was going to be paid by TCE was my understanding, but because that's not in effect, that person is no longer available to us. And how would this bylaw have rectified that situation when the project, like, again, I'm feeling like we're in a catch-22 with this thing, that we want to spend money to analyze the project, but we're being told the project hasn't started so that this bylaw can apply to it. So we can't spend, like, so where are we?
Bob? Oh, I don't know.
If I ask that question a slightly different way, has municipality been reimbursed to date for the project without this bylaw?
Yes, I believe there's are some invoices that are now being prepared, but yes, the municipality has been paid to date for the invoices that have been submitted to TCE.
Okay, and to follow up on that, I have some minimal experience in working in different towns and building out different buildings, 22 in Ontario. And you always go to municipality and say, yeah, I have this idea. And you explore approval, you explore process, you explore resistance. And only then do you start to check boxes on your own internal process as to whether this town's a good candidate for a project. To open 22 locations, I probably scouted 50. And some were future projects I didn't get to. And some were taken off the list because they weren't ready. And they weren't ready for a variety of reasons. Maybe the municipality or the trading area wasn't large enough to sustain one of our locations. But there was always this pre-conversation and exploratory series of conversations to just understand the lay of the land in that municipality. For fun, in Belleville, while I was talking to the economic development officer, I got a parking ticket because I overstayed my 3-hour meter while we had an incredibly deep and wonderful discussion. I opened in Belleville anyway, but I should have framed the $30 ticket because I thought it was hilarious. Because here you are, chasing me away at the same time you're embracing me. And so it was pretty interesting to go through the process, gave me a great story for $30. But it seems to me that, at this stage of the game, there's been so many discussions. And so the bylaw's years late, if it's necessary today. That's my opinion. But I'm glad it's, we're fixing a gap. If indeed that's a gap. But the fact that the process is going forward and that TC is demonstrating some recognition of process and incurring costs and the municipalities being reimbursed for those, that to me seems a reasonable thing without the bylaw. And if the bylaw strengthens it, that's a great thing. I do have a follow-up, if I may. who's going to drive the community benefits agreement? When Rob Armstrong was CAO, I had several discussions with him in my role with the Chamber of Commerce. And I was under the impression that he was certainly involved in that discussion, but I've never seen anything formal that says this is the person who is the chair of the committee driving the community benefits agreement. Is there any answer to that?
I can tell you my third day, that is a priority to determine who is going to take the lead from a staff perspective on that. That needs to be crystal clear, for a number of reasons. But I know I've had actually 3 meetings in my 3 days, in regards to the work that's been done thus far. Met today just in regards to the community benefit piece. So I think it's hugely important to be able to identify somebody from staff that is the lead on that, to be able to shepherd that through, provide some consistency. I'm not going to say it will need a significant amount of legal counsel support, just to make sure that everything is done properly, and it will take a lot of consultation with the proponents and external proponents as well, just to make sure everything makes sense. You know, I'm a big proponent, even fairness advisors to be included in this, just to make sure that from a openness and transparency and process, I think that's a really key piece, just to make sure that you know, things will get scrutinized, and to be able to say at the end of the day and through the process that no, everything is being done the way it should be done, and ultimately the community is looked after.
Yeah, Bob.
Yes, thank you for everyone's input, and the amount of work you've done is pretty phenomenal. And I agree, we need to have this. It's a good thing. And Bob, I listened to what you said, but I think there's few projects that a municipality would face with that has the potential to affect the municipality as much as this one would. So the idea that you wait until the project is posted on the government website and you have 30 days after that, and the shovel can be in the ground. We spoke last meeting about the urgency to get some kind of a handle on where we are for its water quality. So when you wait till that date, you don't have any time to establish what we spoke about. I believe that the bylaw that you're speaking about here needs to have, like Doug said, some kind of a timeline, or an agreement put in place. One of the things your bylaw states is that, you know, when a proponent brings something forward, they're going to have to cover your cost. I believe that's in there, right? Correct. So the cost for the municipality to look at a project of this size, or any size, you know, that might come along like this, you'd have to start before the project necessarily would be actually a project. You know, TC is presently, you know, funding is starting to be available. It happens to be taxpayers' money, 285 million of all of our dollars that went to TC to help fund this stuff. So this is something that I think that we have to also remember in mind. But to have no deadline for this, for a project this size, puts municipality at a huge disadvantage, because you could be scrambling after the fact, right? The wheels will be turning, the shovels will be digging holes before you even think about it at this point. So I believe it's again what Doug is saying. The as soon as possible thing seems very vague to me.
Questions or comments? All right, Jenny.
I have one more small comment. Just under the purpose too. When they're talking about supporting and promoting, I don't know if the municipality needs to promote it. I think they should be a neutral party. I don't think it's their job to promote it, because. And I think, yeah, looking at not just, when they're talking about looking at the impacts, I think they should be both short-term and long-term as well. My 2 cents.
Early?
Thanks again, Mr. Chair. I think I likely know the answer to this, but I just want to have it verified. It's in section 7, 7.2 point IV, it's on the top of, page 5 in here, or in my computer, the potential impacts report. Through you to, Denise, Ms. McCarl. I'm assuming that potential impacts report in the bylaw refers only to the potential impacts report from the proponent. That does not exclude other potential impacts report, I hope, which may come from other sources as far as what the potential impacts might be. Have I asked that in a decent manner?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So potentially there could be other reports. When I think of a Planning Act related matter, so a developer may submit an a report that includes potential impacts, we would typically peer review that, and it would depend on what the impacts are. So for example, we could do an economic impacts study. We could have that peer reviewed. It could be natural heritage. It could be both of those or other things. And they would be peer reviewed by the appropriate type expert who has knowledge in that thing. And they may recommend bolstering that impacts report, improving it. That's pretty common. So I would suspect that just because the report is submitted doesn't mean it's in the final form. It may need revised, it may need improved or bolstered before it is accepted as a final report.
In section 7.2, number 3. I'm confused by the wording. So the applicable law, including a description of one or more maps showing the location of the laws and policies applicable to the private development. I just didn't understand. You're gonna have a map showing where town hall is? Where?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. That's a great point. It may be just the wording is a little bit
Is it? Okay.
funky there. And I'll certainly take that back and see if we can reword to make it more clear.
Great. Just because it's important to me, has staff put any thought into how at reasonable intervals the municipality shall consult with the public over the private development and relative information? That's number 8. I'm just wondering, because we're looking for ideas on how to engage with the public over a private development, and we haven't been successful. I'm wondering if there's been other ideas that may have been generated with this bylaw.
So, Mr. Chair, we haven't generated any specific ideas of engagement, but there are lots of different tools available. And once projects are launched, those become things like the open house, the public meeting. There could be, I would call them briefing notes or easy to read miniature reports that just summarize information to make it digestible for the public, because obviously the density of some of the reports when they're technical in nature makes it hard for regular people to read. So those are the types of things I would expect to happen as part of the engagement.
At 6:48, are there any more questions from the committee on this? No. So with that, the committee's provided comments and questions. Is that what council was looking for from the committee? Yeah. There we go. Mission accomplished. Uh-oh, Dave.
I've just got 2 points. So we are free to comment on our own. Yes. And the other thing was, if we're in a position now, we had a little discussion at the last meeting and we brought forth the idea of a motion. And I know Jenny, we've got a fellow sitting in the back corner with a lot of knowledge in this project that has no mechanism to say anything. And I think we asked permission to ask Clark a question. And I would like to see if we could have a motion to allow us to ask Clark. I'm not, or Clark or whoever representative of TC Energy is in the building.
I just want to make sure I understand. So you're looking for a motion
So
to compel Clark to talk?
No, well, at the last meeting, we had a question, Ginny wanted an answer, and I think we all agreed that we could ask Clark and he could speak.
Right.
So I would like a motion that if we have a question, we're allowed to ask the representatives of TC Energy, if there is one at the room, to answer the question, if they are able to. I guess that would be the appropriate thing. I'd like to make a motion. Somebody could probably clean up my language.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So in regards to procedure, I think what you would be looking for would actually be a change in the format of the agenda. It's the reason being, anybody who is looking at the agenda and determining whether or not they want to attend, because an individual may have the opportunity to speak. I think that would have to be on a standing item potentially, or else it's not fair for the members of the public to not know that that question is going to be asked for open, transparent reasons. And that's typically why the procedural bylaw requires that anybody who is going to speak or be asked to speak would be on a standing item. Hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah. So the suggestion then would be add a standing item to the agenda?
Considering the modification of your agenda template could be a potential.
Adam?
Just speaking to that and possible suggestions for this process. We might not, again, just to keep transparency and open to the public so that they know what's going on. We might not be able to get answers at that exact meeting, but maybe one meeting delayed, whether at the end or the beginning, we decide the series of questions we are going to be proposing to TCE every meeting, and there be time at the end for TCE to answer each of those questions at the end of the meeting, things like that. So we can put on the agenda exactly what questions we are expecting of TCE, and then they have the ability to answer those questions each meeting.
Okay, so why don't we defer this to the agenda planning meeting where let's have that discussion, because I think it's probably important that we engage with TCE as well to make sure that we don't put them on the agenda and they don't want to be on the agenda.
Because to me, if we're going to ask a question, I think we all would want the answer.
Absolutely.
So providing them with the question and then giving them time to come back with an answer versus just expecting the TCE representative to know everything and then we not get a fulsome answer.
Yeah.
So.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jimmy?
And I think it'd have to be, yeah, answering a question versus it being a sales speech.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you make the agenda setting April 23rd, 10:30? It's going to be it's a party. Awesome.
Just, Mr. Chair, just one suggestion. I will commit to working with our legislative services, because I think there's a couple of options that we may be able to use to actually get the questions out to the larger community as well. I've got some ideas, but it might be something that I can provide. First, can we do it? And second, maybe some options for you to consider at that agenda meeting.
And I think the intent for the question, it's when there's something we just don't know the easy answer to, but there's a resource sitting here that does, right? It's just to get that.
Yeah, like at the last meeting, I forget what the discussion was about, but there was something, and we polled among ourselves, was it all right to ask the representative from TC, and he was able to answer us. I wasn't thinking so much of firing a block of questions at him in advance, but that's up. TC could, say we're willing for that. But if there's some information that the representative from TC has and is able to give to us, it saves us wondering.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we'll loop back to that at the agenda setting. The next thing on our agenda is the items for consideration. And I know at the last meeting, I watched online, both the chair and vice chair were absent and were reelected.
Sorry about your luck.
Yeah, that's, you don't show up. Um, uh, Anyway, it looks like there's a recommendation that the Pump Storage Advisory Committee appoint Doug Haslam as chair and Howard Fletcher as vice chair for the 2025 calendar year. Do we need a motion on that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I need a mover and a seconder.
Can I get a mover for that? Dave, and seconder Ginny. All right. All in favor? Yeah, there we go. Okay, the next thing is motions for decision. At the last meeting, Bob Baranski raised this for the committee. There's been a bunch of work that's occurred from the last meeting to this one, working with staff to come up with the appropriate wording for this. I'm assuming that everyone has read it, and maybe Bob, do you want to take us through it one more time? Cold call.
Certainly. So at the last meeting, we discussed baselines for water, baselines for many things. And we also discussed review of the environmental bylaws that Meaford has. But when I looked into the water, which I've done some work on and spoke to some people who are experts in this field, I believe the water is a situation that needs to have its own motion and looked at individually. Hence, that's why I brought this motion forward. So the water is very, very complicated and it touches us all in many different ways. And just to test for water quality standards for drinking water really wouldn't give the committee what they want. That's why I've expanded this to include many things that are possible that could exist and end up in our water at this point in time, just to give the committee an idea of where I'm going on this. And there are examples I have of this, but if we need them, I'm happy to verse them at this point in time. So that's why I decided that my motion should concentrate on the water. I think it's also one that should be put to council as soon as possible. Irregardless of funding's available or not, it needs to be there on the agenda for them that they've looked at and possibly asked, started the process. So when funding is available, that we don't have a big delay at this point in time. So that is why I did this particular thing. Does anyone have any questions on what I've done here?
Adam?
Just to make sure that this wouldn't only look at bay water, but also inland water, well water, things like that, that it's not just centered around the bay, but also further inland as well.
Yeah, in my motion, I did say that testing the waters of Georgian Bay, the wells and the municipal water supply. I tried to, cover them all because they're all part of our drinking water, whether we, draw our water from the bay directly, whether we drink the municipal water from Meaford, or whether you happen to have a well in the area.
I guess it was just the wells to be clarified as inland private wells, things like that.
I'm not an expert on that, and that's why at the end of this, I defer to saying that the consulting firm that's hired to do this work really needs to be experts on this field, and they would decide that given the type of geology that's underneath this, how far would these things end up? Is it 2K, 5K, 10K? I can't go there, and I don't think we should be telling consultants who spend their lives in this and do this every day how to do it. They need to tell us, and then we need to listen, I believe.
All right, so
I have one more question, just something. And this is a question procedure. So once I make a motion like this, here's what happens. So I made a motion, and then I discussed the motion with some experts in the field. And they said, well, it's a pretty good motion, but you could do better on describing the skills necessary for the consultant. because, you know, the ones you've got are kind of general and you really need something specific on this. So once you make a motion like this and we have a meeting on this, can I change or can it be changed? Like, for instance, in this case, I would change the actual description of the type of person that would have to be hired, a firm that have to be hired to do this work. Is that allowed?
If I may, Mr. Chair, that would just be an amendment.
Can I make that at this point in time? All right. So shall I read it out? All right, at this point in time. So in my motion, where I've changed things is that where we end up is said the firm to perform the test shall be arm's length from TCE with the capability to test for carcinogens and SUPNOP. And the selected firm, that's where I've started to change it. Here's why I've changed the description of the firm. Instead of saying the firm hired to perform the test shall be arm's length, because I've got that. The test, but they all should be capable of testing for carcinogens, heavy metals, and toxins. Here's where I've changed that. The selected firm should be should demonstrate expertise in toxicology, ecology, and human health risk assessment. Have staff designated as qualified persons. Risk assessment by the Minister of Environment, Conservation, and Parks. The selected firm should undertake a review of existing data and reports that pertain to the delineation and characterization of the contaminants in the water, sediment, and soils within the areas affected by the pump storage project and the pertaining water quality in general within Georgian Bay. The selected firms will then formulate a plan for monitoring the potential release of contaminants from the site and potential impacts off the pump storage project on water quality in Wells and Georgian Bay. The plan will detail, among other things, the type of tests necessary, including but not limited to all those listed above, the sampling locations, the media, meaning brackets, water, sediment, soil, biotoll, frequency of testing, and criteria for evaluation. The testing should start immediately to characterize baseline conditions and to proceed through the site clearing, construction, and operational phases. So that's the change I've made. So the description of the consultant is more detailed. And that was given to me to help to write that by someone who is knowledgeable about this type of thing.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to ask a question of CAO Everett. So we understand that TC Energy will be doing a number of impact assessment reports, and my assumption is they will be testing the water. That will be part of what they will be required to do. So I think what Mr. Bransky is outlining is we've agreed we will peer review all of the reports from TC Energy. So what you've really outlined is a detailed assessment of how we will review that particular report from TC Energy regarding the water sampling. Is that where you're going?
Not necessarily, because again, we need to establish the baselines today. I use that liberally. This would take a while to get into place. If we wait for the impact assessment, which happens after the project is confirmed, we'll have no baseline. So what I'm proposing here is something that needs to start today, because we've got, first of all, it's, you know, the actual reports, when you hire a consultant to do this, they're going to ask TC Energy for their reports, some of the reports, so that they can establish where they think that the contaminants might enter our water and what might happen. And if we wait till the last minute before the project is ready to, you know, the machines are up there, how are we going to establish this baseline? You know, and the points of testing to have this all set up, have that testing going on. It has to be done before the project starts, and it should be, you know, some time before the project starts. It can't be right at the date. Okay, now, because the impact assessment, as I think everyone was aware after they presented here, they don't do any studies of anything. They just simply review data, and there's nothing wrong with that. And whoever's hired for this will ask TC Energy for the tests they have done to date And hopefully TC Energy will share that with them so they can establish these baselines. But I believe it needs to start ahead of time. I believe it should start now. We've got, if I'm not mistaken, what Mr. Little said at the last meeting, we had 3 years before the potential for this. So, it might take 6 months to put this in place. I don't know. But if we wait, we won't have a baseline.
Really appreciate that clarification, Bob, and I just wonder if I can come back to CAO Everett with your permission, Mr. Chair, for
What was the question?
sorry. Yeah, I think I started out by asking, which I think Bob actually clarified. I mean, recognizing that TC Energy will be doing impact assessments and water will be one of the things that they will be, exploring and our third-party review and how that relates to the motion.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, I'm sure that there will be a number of studies, and from what I gleaned from that discussion was, getting one done ASAP and outside of maybe what is to come. Because I think if that was the case, I think that's a specific ask that you basically want to create your baseline, and you basically want to get those studies going from a consultant that is a neutral third-party consultant. I know that would be discussions that we would have to have with TCE to be able to see what that looks like. Peer reviews are a pretty powerful thing. I think the key thing in any peer review is, the municipality or the agency, they're the ones who get to pick the consultant that does the peer reviews. So it's not like the proponent just gets to, yeah, oh, you want a peer reviewed? I'm going to pick the peer reviewer that I'm going to have. No. They don't get to pick that. So that piece is a pretty important piece. The other piece that I will say, I've seen peer reviews, they'll review what has been presented. Sometimes there are things missed that haven't been done in the first study. So there is that fine line, and you always want to stay very on track of what we're asking for, what is being asked for, and what's not being asked for. So.
Adam?
I guess in that vein, I'm just looking for a little clarification on what is being asked. Bob, are you asking for the municipality to hire a firm to go out and collect its own samples, or to review the data that TCE has collected independently?
When I'm asking that municipality hire a consultant to review what TCE has as far as, what might affect our water. But then the consulting firm that is hired to do this then takes that information and formulates the test they think necessary to capture anything that could be coming down that would contaminate our wells and water, right? So they would take that information and they would peer review it, just that information concerning the water and how it might affect it. And then they would take that back and establish the rules, or pardon me, not the rules, but what they're going to test for, how they're going to do it, and where they're going to do it, and set that up ahead of time.
Is this going to rely on TCE's collected, like TCE will pick out the bottle of water and hand it to our selected firm, or will our selected firm go out and get their own bottle of water?
You turned it off.
Got the wrong one going. So now we got it right. So here's, I think, how this will play out. Again, here's a layman thinking on this, but I think what would happen is that the firm that's hired would ask TCE for what they've got. They would peer review that, look at it, and they would say, this is pretty good. I think they've got all the bases covered. That allows us to know that there's this toxin, that toxin, this possibility where it might be and where it might go. So now we'll establish what we're going to test for. We'll decide where we're going to do that and how often. Now, if they review TC Energy's data and they say, you know what, it's not as good as we'd like. There's a few things missing. At that point, they would either have to collect those samples themselves or get it from TCE. That decision would have to be made at the time, depending on funding, which we don't know about. But that's how I see this going. So initially, you know, I don't think that any of the testing that TCE has done is going to be erroneous in that sense of the word. I think it's probably going to be looked at from another expert and decide, is this the way to do it, right? Is there enough for us to do what the, you know, with the motion and what the town wants, which is a study of the water? Yes, it is. Okay, let's put it into play.
So if I could just, is the intent then is to not rely on peer review, but to have the ability to do something beyond if there is something missing in the data that's.
I guess
provided.
that's my point. If we're waiting for TCE to hand us the bottle of water or the results of the testing of the bottle of water, if they haven't done it, then they have nothing to hand us to review. I think if we want to establish a baseline right now, we have to empower this recommendation to seek its own data outside of TCE, because then we're not waiting. So I think whether that's an amendment or a clarification, but I think that whatever firm or organization is decided to review or conduct these studies, they need to be empowered to collect their own data and not rely on TCE to provide them with it.
I'll respond to that. I hear what you're saying, Adam, but I don't think that, you know, TCE's been working on this for 5 years. And I think during those 5 years, they will have, you know, will have done a lot of hard work and a lot of expensive work. So now I think to throw that out and start fresh would be the wrong approach for getting this done quickly, because these things take a long time to do. So again, I can revert back to what I just said. So the person we hire is going to be not the person we hire, that we recommend that council and staff looks at and hires, is someone who's an expert in this field. They know when they look at TCE's, you know, existing data, that this is good enough for us to set up our monitoring, and they're going to do the monitoring, not TC. This firm that we're talking about is going to set these up and do the monitoring and set up the testing for this. So all they're going to do initially, in my view, in the way I would like this motion, is to look at what exists today, so that we're not trying to recreate the wheel, moves the thing along that much quicker. And once they establish that, okay, there's good enough, let's get to work now. But they're going to do the testing, not TCE from that point in time. They'll set up they'll be getting the bottle of water. They'll be testing at this point in time and be continuing to test throughout the project.
If I could, so the way you've written it, I think, apart from all of the detail of what the consultant that you added, but the way you've written it, it's hire a third-party consulting firm to begin testing the waters. I think that's it. And what we don't want is we don't want them to say, well, let's go into the middle of the bay where we know TCE has taken samples and tested that water. That's not really what we're as interested in with, well, actually we are. Don't repeat. If they've got data and they're willing to hand it to us to utilize, great. But if we need to check wells and shoreline, then, and municipal water supply independently.
Just make a couple example points here. So for instance, one of the toxins that's up on the base is more than likely is these PAFs. And right now, North Bay has had their water contaminated from the local Air Force base. And their main water source is Trout Lake. And municipality draws its water from Trout Lake. So at the present, the municipality now, because the water's been being tested for some time, municipality has to upgrade their water treatment plant because it doesn't meet standards right now. It has too many of these toxins in it. There's no funding for that. So this puts the municipality in a bind. So we do need to test in the middle of the bay because, you know, the water for the municipality comes from the bay. And the thing is that, you know, this is an example of what happens And if there would have been ongoing testing for the years that, you know, that base was operational, or in this case, TC Energy's thing is operational and baseline setup, they might have known ahead of time, and funding to upgrade that plant might have been made available. Because, you know, our main goal here is to let the municipality know is how it's going to impact them. Well, let me tell you, if all of a sudden the minister came down and said, Meaford, you need to upgrade your plant right now, and we don't have any funding. So I think that's one example. And the other example, let's take, for instance, we talk about be specific. We're going to just test the wells and test the water coming into our house. But what would happen if we just had an example here at the Bruce, where there's 3.5 to 4.5 million fish killed, and those fish have washed up on the shores down there. Now, you know, nobody knows what happened, but at this point in time, but that's a pretty big fish kill. How would that affect a fish kill like that? Let's say that somehow when TC Energy disturbs the soil in the basin, something like this happens, or they increase the temperature, and we get a fish kill like that. If that's not looked at, which these consultants will, the water quality in the sense to support aquatic life, which is definitely not part of the drinking water standards, Adam. And this happened in the summer months, and those washed up on the beach down at your place, Dave. How do you think that would economically affect Meaford? I think it would have a great impact. So these are things that we don't know about, but that can impact Meaford at this point. So that's why I think we need to use the data that's available, and then we need to have a firm look at it. If it's good, great. If it's not great, then do the testing that they need to bring it up to standards, get those tests going. And they're going to be testing for drinking water, but not just for what most drinking water standards are. Humans are pretty robust when it comes to drinking water. We can put up with a lot of things, but there are many other things in there that can't, and we don't know the long-term effect from. And drinking water standards do not test for a lot of these dioxins and stuff and toxins at this point. So that's what I was trying to get across to.
So here we are. Yeah, Ginny?
I'm just wondering if we were gonna fast that, could we ask Mr. Little what data exists so we know which kind of route to point in? Like, can he tell us if the tests are available and that's something that could be looked at and they're willing to share, or so we know where we're starting? Or no?
No, I think until we have our agenda setting and figure out how to put Clark on the spot, we shouldn't put Clark on the spot. So I don't exactly know how to proceed with the words on this piece of paper, given what we've just talked about. Because as it's written, we can't, that's not what we're recommending anymore, correct? Let's not defer to Sue.
I think it is. So
Yeah,
I believe it is. All of what we're asking for is we want our water tested, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's what
so
it asks.
allow me to read this, and I've got two minor changes that I put into it,
Yep.
and then see if the committee is willing to make the recommendation. So be it resolved that the Pump Storage Advisory Committee respectfully recommends that the Council of the Municipality of Meaford take steps to hire a third-party consulting firm to begin testing the waters of Georgian Bay, the inland and shore wells, and the municipal water supply. The firm hired to perform the test shall be arm's length from TCE with the capability to test for carcinogens, heavy metals, toxins, including but not limited to PFAS, dioxins, furan, etc., known or likely to exist at 4th Canadian Training Center. The test should meet provincial water quality objectives for the protection of aquatic life as well as the drinking water standards. The test should start immediately and continue for the life of the pump storage project. The type of test necessary, including all those listed above, the testing sites and the frequency of testing will be formulated by the consulting firm. Testing results should be made available for the public to access easily and without cost.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I'll try to
Yes.
help with this. Okay, so Bob, you moved your motion. And who seconded it? Adam seconded it. Okay. So that went on the floor for discussion. Bob proposed an amendment. So Bob moved the amendment. Who's going to second Bob's amendment? Jenny? Okay, so we've had discussion on that amendment. Does anybody else want to discuss that amendment? Okay, so Adam, did you want to discuss Bob's first amendment?
Oh, is that basically what has just been read?
No.
No, that was the original. Can you reread for the committee the section? Your microphone, please.
Oh, sorry. So the reason I changed this, I didn't change the first part, so let me read the whole thing. Be it resolved that the Pump Storage Advisory Committee respectfully recommends the Council of Meaford, Municipality of Meaford, take steps to hire a third-party consulting firm to begin testing the waters of Georgian Bay, the wells, site drainage, and the municipal water supply. The firm hired to perform the test shall be arm's length from TCE, with the capability to test for carcinogens, heavy metals, toxins, including but not limited to PFAS, I always do this wrong, PFAS, dioxins, furans, etc., known to or likely to exist on 4th Canadian Training Center. Now I've changed up the description of the firm. So here's where I've made the change, Adam, from what you see in front of you, all right? And I've said the selected firm should demonstrate expertise in toxicology, ecological and human health risk assessment, and have staff designated as qualified persons. Risk assessment by the Ministry of Conservation, Environment, Conservation and Parks. The selected firm should undertake a review of existing data and reports that pertain to the delineation and characteristics of contaminants in the water, sediment, and soils within the area affected by the proposed pump storage project and pertaining to water quality in general within Georgian Bay. The selected firm will then formulate a plan for monitoring the potential release of contaminants from the site and the potential impacts of the pump storage project on water quality in wells and Georgian Bay. The plan will detail, among other things, the type of tests necessary, including but not limited to all those listed above, the sampling locations, the media, water, sediment, soil, frequency of testing, and criteria for evaluation. The testing should start immediately to characterize baseline conditions and to proceed through the site clearing, construction, and operating phases, and to proceed through site clearing, construction, and operations. Testing results should be available for the public to access easily and without cost to the public. So all I've done is change the description of the consulting firm that's hired to do the work.
Chair, is there any discussion on the amendment Bob has proposed?
Nope.
Seeing none, I'd ask then for a vote. All in favor of that amendment, as Bob just read?
Yep.
And those opposed?
Any? Nope.
Okay, then that amendment carries. Now, Mr. Chair, you had a second amendment. Can you please reread that for the committee?
Yes, and so the second amendment is in the first paragraph where it talks about testing the waters of Georgian Bay, the inland and shore wells, just adding inland and shore. So so that's my amendment. Any questions or comments on that amendment?
We'll need a seconder for that amendment, Adam. And any discussion?
Any discussion? No? All in favor?
Any opposed?
Nope.
And then you'll need to
All right, so I'm not going to read it again. If I could get a motion to approve this recommendation, including the two amendments to it. If I could get.
Go back to the original mover and the original seconder and see if they're agreeable to, but now with the amendment.
And I don't remember who that is, so
I'm
original
in
mover
agreement.
and seconder, Adam. Any questions with those amendments? No, so they're good. All in favor? All right. Any opposed? Good.
That was hard.
Wow, that was that's our first one, so we're making progress. It is 7:24, so I appreciate everyone's patience as we've gone along. Committee inquiries, which is are there anything that the committee wants to raise or discuss? Ginny?
I just have one hopefully quick one. So back in 22, the council had put forth a recommendation, I guess 22-2613, having municipal bylaws with the water noise and air pollution. I was just wondering if that got resolved, if we could ask council to look into that. And the part B of that is if council putting forth the motion, if council could provide a summary of federal and provincial legislation and regulations with regards to those provincial and federal pieces. Could that be provided to this group? Sure, notice of motion. I don't know.
Just have a question. So, there's an outstanding motion, right, on this?
Correct. I think one was brought forth, but I don't know if it was ever
Yeah.
answered by,
There's an outstanding motion. Can I just?
yeah, you take
I'm
over.
just gonna put this in. It's number 2022-26-13. And the motion was put forward by Councilman S. Bartley. And it has to do with the updating of the noise, atmospheric pollution, and bylaws of such. And I just wonder, like, Jenny's motion to look at this, if you have an open outstanding motion, what's the procedure? Like, how does that work if it's very similar?
Through Mr. Chair, one of the reports that I'll be bringing forward over the next month or so, we'll be looking at bringing forward to council the open motions, all the outstanding items, and seeing which ones are relevant. Staff has just advised that that is an open motion that still needs to be completed. So don't need a notice of motion on that one because I'll be bringing that forward as part of my first part of my new job.
Okay, that sounds great. But do I have to bring forth the summary for the federal and provincial? Is that new or we're going to cover that as well?
That would be new. So that would require additional information or additional request to council through the notice of motion.
Can I make that motion then?
Yeah, can you just say it one more time?
Okay, so a summary of the federal and provincial legislation and regulations. So around what they cover as far as their, noise, air, water, what they're covering for all of those bylaws. So kind of bringing that all together so that we know where each one sits.
Okay. So we've got a notice of motion. I wasn't here last time. What happens when someone raises a notice of motion?
Both Dave and Ginny now have notices of motion. So on the next agenda, we will see those motions and we will address them just as we have Bob's motion here this evening. So I would suggest if you wanted to put some language together around those motions and submit that to staff, and they may massage it a little bit. Yeah.
And you are hereby invited to the agenda setting meeting at 10:30 on April 23rd to discuss your notice of motion. What's it called? It's
15 Trowbridge.
Yeah.
Where you went.
The-
with the-
Oh,
Yeah, the plan.
The old library.
Yeah. Are there any other committee inquiries? Adam?
I'm gonna keep asking it so that it's still on the minutes of every meeting. What is the status of the hybrid meeting style?
Sean?
I can, I can give a bit of an update on that. That's something that I'm working with Legislative Services to be able to dive deeper into what is our technical capabilities of being able to provide that. I do believe right now we are limited with some of the technical aspects of our systems, but that is something that I'll be working with Margaret on in the very near future.
Yeah, Bob.
Um, I just think that, for myself, this is a very important point. Adam has brought up many times, starting last year. And, I have travel coming up and, wherever I go in the world, most places do have internet. And we could, the meetings that I've missed, I could have participated. So it's really important. I think I understand what you're saying, that, you're in a new seat and you have to look into things. But using a phrase that's been beat to death, it's not rocket science, right? At this point in time, we should be able to do that. People are here and they're communicating with us, doing slides, and we listen to them and can ask questions. But the same's not true, and I don't grasp that. Probably Adam would grasp it better than I do, but I just think it's an urgent request.
Through Mr. Chair, and I won't go into detail. There's a significant amount of training that goes through it as well, just with the understanding if a member can't hook up, it's not our problem. You miss the meeting. Those are the things that my experience at my previous employment, many committee members thought it was up to staff to fix their home internet problems, and it's not. So as long as the parameters are set up and the expectations are set up, it may not be a big deal. It is extremely hard to get that message through when somebody's trying to get in, to a point where my previous employment, they actually, like the cost of resourcing, they actually have IT at all the meetings to try to problem solve. We just simply don't have the resources, and I can tell you my previous employer doesn't have the resources either. So it becomes a point of what the level of service expectation is, and if you can't hook up, and the meeting goes on.
No, I agree 100%. It's not your responsibility to fix my system. I agree. And I think that would be a real plus to the committee for us to be able to do this.
Okay, we are moving on to communications. So the committee will consider correspondence received from members of the public during each meeting. To share your comments, thoughts, or concerns with members of the committee, public can send an email to pumpstorage@meaford.ca. There were two emails received, one from Ginny, which is a news story about the fish kill. Was there a method to play that? Or because that's what you had requested, can we play this at the next meeting? Okay, so yeah, everyone should look at it. It's 3.5 million fish killed at Bruce Nuclear. And then there was looks like follow-up from David Stiff, who did the presentation from Cancia. And again, he clarified some points, and everyone's been given that. Are there any questions about correspondence that was received? No. Okay. Are there any public questions? Nope. Okay. Our next meeting is May the 8th, 2025. The planning meeting is April 23rd, 10:30 in the morning. And I think we're going to have adequate
Address where that is?
It's the old library. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. It's 7:30. So with that, I'll adjourn the meeting.